The first grounds, really, that you could say are designed just for football are really in the early 1890s. In Liverpool, Anfield is developed, and then Goodison is developed. In London, you've got football grounds at Fulham in 1896. In Manchester, you've got Newton Heath in the 1890s. There's nothing technologically new about these grounds. Nobody is reinventing anything. They are simply a rectangular pitch with a rail and wooden stands around the outside and people standing on earth. There is no science in there. There's no engineering, if you like. The kind of stand that is being built is the same technology that is being built in the 1870s for cricket, for example, or for athletics. What happens in the 1890s is, as the grounds get bigger, you have to start building more robust structures. They have to physically get bigger. And so you have to start thinking more in engineering terms. And Leitch, he was not the first person to build a big stand, but he was the first person to sit down really at a drawing board and say, right, well, if a man is standing there on the terrace and another man is standing up there at the back of the terrace, what are the lines that you need to take? What are the calculations that you need to make? His first stadiums are, if you like, experiments. They're prototypes. And he makes a terrible mistake in one of them at Ibrox Park in Glasgow. Up to this point, if you wanted to build a high terrace, most people are building it with wood. A steel frame and wooden, what we would say in America, we would call them bleachers, wooden planks. And so Archibald Leitch, he designs really the first large purpose-built football stadium using that method. But what happened at Ibrox was that the timber wasn't good quality and something split. One or two of the planks, they split and people fell through. And 26 or so people died. And this could have been the end of Archie's career. He could, at that point, have said, well, look, I made a terrible mistake. The disaster haunted him. He was a Christian. He was a member of his community. He was somebody in Glasgow who was respected. And he could have become a social pariah. This was the man whose mistakes cost the lives of 26 people. But he was a fighter. And I think also, crucially, he loved football. He was a Rangers fan. So he did what every good engineer would do in his situation. He said, okay, we have a systems failure here. How do we put it right? And that is when the story of the modern stadium begins. The terrace, the modern terrace, with concrete steps, steel crush barriers. That was Archibald Leitch's designs. He draws up a patent for that design. It's not just a piece of metal in the ground, it is a proper structure. Up to that point, all the barriers had been wood, made out of timber. So he is engineering this solution. The stands that he's built, he's using concrete, he's using steel, he is calculating the number of exits you need, how to raise the tiers so that everybody has good sight lines that they can see, using fireproof materials so that if there was a fire, it wouldn't be so dangerous. He is calculating the relationship between the stand and the pitch so that you're close, but not too close, so the person in the front can see. He introduces the idea of drainage so that the seat at the front is below seat below pitch level, and the pitch is there so that the drainage can come out. And it means also that your stand, because it starts low, it doesn't have to be so high at the back. And crucially, that saves money for the football clubs, because in 1900, just as in 2016, football clubs are desperate to save money. And the final thing that Archie does, which is crucial, in his other life as an engineer, he designs factories. He's really a factory designer who designs football grounds in his spare time. And the thing about a factory is that it is functional. It has to be functional. So he has a sort of a pattern book, what we would call a pattern book. So you can have a cheap, very cheap factory-like stand, which is just corrugated iron, a bit of timber, nothing fancy, cheap, cheerful. It's like a flat pack from IKEA. Literally, it is made in a factory in Glasgow. All the steel work is assembled. It arrives at the ground. A group of workers, they put it all together, bit of wood, bit of iron, and boom, you have a stand. And you can do that in the close season, during the summer. So this is very important to football clubs. They now have a man who understands the finances, he understands the engineering, he understands the timing to build it quickly. And on top of that, he is part of their culture. He is a football man. Going back to his pattern book, we're now talking about the most expensive models, if you like, and this would be stands that are double-deckers, not just two tiers. If you have two tiers, it's like that. If you have a double-decker, the upper deck sits over the top, so you have more space for spectators, and it's engineering-wise, it's more complicated because it's spanning over. So that's the expensive stand. And also at the top, he will have a gable that tells you the name of the club. So Fulham, Chelsea, Sheffield Wednesday, Tottenham Hotspur. The gable is extra. It's an extra expense. And if you look at the back of the stand where it faces the street, instead of metal sheeting, there will be brick. And really the two that stands out are Ibrox Park in the 1920s. He rebuilt Ibrox Park twice during his life. In 1928-29 he built the huge South Stand at Ibrox, which is now a listed building. And in Birmingham he builds the Trinity Road Stand at Aston Villa, which is where I watched my first football match. That is Archibald Leitch's drawing for Aston Villa in also 1924. So his best work is in the 1920s. Unfortunately, the one at Aston Villa has been demolished. I tried to save it, but I failed. But the one in Glasgow does survive. Those are the two best. But there are others which are classic Archibald Leitch, which at the time you would not have said these are outstanding, but as time went by, people appreciated them more. One is the double-decker stand at Tottenham, at White Hart Lane, the East Stand, which is now being in the process of being demolished. It wasn't a particularly sophisticated piece of engineering, but it had scale, because you had a terrace at the bottom, then you had a terrace in the middle, the shelf, and then you had seating above. So it was 1, 2, 3 tiers. And he did the same for Everton at Goodison Park in 1909, a huge triple-decker stand. Well, it was double-decker, but it looked like it was three tiers. And those were impressive because they were so large. Today, where is the best Archibald Leitch stand? Ibrox Park still, although they have expanded it, you can see the core, the original of it, and the Johnny Haynes stand at Craven Cottage, which is also listed, which again, in 1905, it was not particularly sophisticated, but it survives and it has a beautiful brick exterior, a very ornate piece of detailing on the outside. So he puts the architecture on the outside where the public can see it, and the factory bit, the engineering, is on the inside. And that survives, and fortunately Fulham have looked after it beautifully, and it has become a listed building. There are a few other surviving Leitch stands. Dundee has one, Portsmouth have one. They are not so architecturally interesting, but as every year goes by and every year we lose something, the stand at Heart of Midlothian in Edinburgh from 1913-14, that is being demolished soon. So the number of stands we have from Leitch, it goes down every year. But I think Fulham and Rangers will be the two that people will look at and say these are Leitch stands that deserve to be enjoyed and acknowledged.